welcome to this explainer. Let's jump right in, shall we? Today, we're unpacking a highly academic, deeply philosophical text that essentially decodes the very DNA of human societies. We're going to explore how civilizations are built, why they inevitably collapse, and how they might actually be revived. And we're doing all this through the lens of the classical sociology of the legendary thinker Ibn Khaldun. Whether you're a history buff, a political science nerd, or just kind of curious about why the modern world looks the way it does, this text offers an absolutely fascinating, sweeping perspective. Here's our roadmap for today. 1. The universal abstract state. 2. From abstract to concrete. 3. Western versus Islamic models. 4. The roots of corruption. 5. Leadership, power, and legitimacy. And finally, 6. A vision for modern revival. Okay, let's trace this structural journey. Section 1. The universal abstract state. We're kicking things off with a massive concept from the text. The author argues that long before we ever worry about specific politicians, kings, or presidents, we first have to understand what they call the abstract state. It's this eternal, universal, structural blueprint. It consists of the essential functions needed for literally any human society to survive, and it is completely independent of who the rulers actually are. Think of it like a house's blueprint. The foundation and walls have to be there regardless of who moves in. It's the absolute baseline for survival. And the author breaks this blueprint down into 10 fixed slots, split perfectly right down the middle. On one side, we have care, or riaya, which covers education, social structures, culture, the economy, and scientific research. Then on the flip side, we have protection, or himaya. That includes justice, security, diplomacy, defense, and intelligence. The text posits that every single successful society absolutely must fulfill these 10 functions. If even one of these pillars crumbles, well, the whole structure's at risk. Section 2. From abstract to concrete. So, if the state is just this perfect, abstract blueprint, who actually builds it in the real world? The text makes a super crucial distinction here between that eternal, unchanging abstract state and what it calls the concrete state. The concrete state is the historical, real-world implementation. It's the specific rulers and regimes filling those 10 slots. As the author points out, the blueprint itself is perfect, but the human beings who fill the roles, not always so much. This is where history actually happens. It's where theory hits reality. Section 3, Western versus Islamic models. Moving forward, the author uses this exact framework to heavily critique how these concrete states were historically built. And the source makes a pretty striking claim here. It contrasts anthropocracy, which is the rule of man, with the Khaldunian Islamic ideal of theocracy, or the rule of God. The author actually claims that the ancient Greek and modern European miracles are often just myths hiding a mafia-like deep state controlled by elites. In stark contrast, they present an idealized Islamic framework designed specifically to liberate humanity from that exact kind of elite domination. To back this up, the source points directly to core Quranic foundations for the state. They argue these verses form a true anti-elite foundation. You have An-Nisa 1 establishing the absolute unity of all humanity. Then Al-Hujurat 13, which dictates that diversity exists from mutual understanding, meaning no superiority exists except through piety and adherence to the law. The ultimate goal here, according to the text, is complete material and spiritual equality. Section 4. The roots of corruption. Because, as we know, even the absolute best blueprints can rot. The author introduces some incredibly vivid symbolism to explain the termites that cause civilizations to collapse. They talk about the religion of the calf, which is a brilliant metaphor for the worship of money, wealth, and usury, and they pair that with the corruption of the table and bed, symbolizing unchecked physical appetites like gluttony and lust. The text argues that when these exact elements infiltrate the concrete state, the structural integrity of the society literally begins to disintegrate. This source actually frames this collapse as a highly predictable three-step disease. Step 1 is financial and verbal usury, basically the corruption of money through unfair economics and the corruption of truth through lies. Step 2 is destructive overconsumption, where eating turns into gluttony that ruins the environment. And finally, step 3 is moral and demographic collapse, marked by things like pornography and the failure to renew the family structure. It's a domino effect of decline that, honestly, we can often recognize in our own modern history. Section 5. Leadership, power, and legitimacy. So how do we prevent this catastrophic collapse? To keep the state secure, the text leans on classical scholars like al-Ghazali, pointing out that a functioning state requires leaders with a very specific dual nature. First, you need al-Faruq, representing shoka. That's physical power, force, and the undeniable capability to protect society. But, power alone is just tyranny, so it has to be paired with a Sadiq, representing Sharia, which is undisputed moral legitimacy, trust, and ethical standing. Whoever fills those 10 blueprint slots must possess both undeniable strength and unwavering ethics. But what about the everyday citizen? Well, the text insists that the public must never outsource their own defense or economic production entirely to the state. The author warns strongly against the nanny state. If the state controls all aspects of care and protection, we just become a society of dependence, essentially living in servitude. True governance requires a highly vigilant, active public that participates in its own survival. Section 6, A Vision for Modern Revival. Finally, the author brings all these centuries-old philosophical concepts crashing right into modern-day geopolitics. The text argues that the Arab and Islamic world experienced a severe geopolitical decline over 3 distinct eras. First, the WWI era with the fall of the Ottoman Caliphate. Second, the post-WWI era defined by the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which the author claims fractured the region into weak, divided ethnic nation-states. And third, the present day, where these divided states fell under the functional protection of foreign empires, stripping the region of its historical agency. Now, maintaining our impartial lens here, the source interprets current Middle Eastern conflicts, referencing contemporary events like the Flood, and pointing to the Levant as indicators that regional hegemonies are reaching their end. The author specifically names Israel and Iran as functional protectors of foreign interests. The source views these current conflicts as the necessary breaking of geographical and historical divisions to spark a broader civilizational revival. So, how do we rebuild the concrete state today? The text proposes a modern system functioning as a true republic, a res publica. The conditions include direct shura, meaning true democratic rule by the public, alongside the total elimination of ethnic and tribal borders. But here's the real kicker. The author proposes utilizing modern telecommunications to actually allow direct, remote public participation in governance. Which brings us to a profound thought. Ibn Khaldun and al-Ghazali theorized about a society where the public was directly involved in governance, but obviously they were limited by physical distance, horses, and messengers. So, if ancient societies were limited by geography, can modern telecommunications finally realize the ultimate direct democracy that classical philosophers only dreamed of? Are our smartphones and digital networks the exact tools needed to finally build this perfect abstract blueprint in the real world? It's an absolutely incredible question to ponder as we look at the future of global statecraft.